Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea from our source material. What if the key to mental discipline isn't about fighting your own thoughts, but making a deal with them? Let me ask you something. Do you control your mind, or does it control you? It's a simple question, right? But the answer, well, it often feels impossibly complex. We've all been there, feeling totally overwhelmed by our own thoughts, getting dragged into the past or the future, and just struggling to stay present for 5 minutes. Okay, so let's get into the core idea here. The source material asks us to think of our mind not as us, but as this separate, powerful, and, kind of unruly entity living inside us. Think of it like a mischievous force that if you don't watch it, will completely run the show. So, to really unpack all this, we're going to move through 5 key ideas. First up, we'll define the problem, the mind as our inner tyrant. Then, we'll look at its surprising power, before we get to the really interesting part, a unique strategy called setting. And finally, we'll cover some practical techniques you can actually use to master your own reality. All right, first up, let's really define the challenge we're all up against. The source describes our own mind as an inner tyrant. Yeah, this should sound pretty familiar. It's that relentless inner monologue, that constant stream of thoughts that fights you when you're just trying to sleep. It creates anxiety, it yanks your attention away from what you're doing, and it's constantly demanding that you engage with it. It can really make you feel powerless. And if you think this is just some personal struggle, well, our source material makes a really powerful point. This inner force is so immense, it's a challenge for literally everyone, even, as we're about to see, for gods. To illustrate this, the source points to these revered figures from Hindu mythology. It argues that even with all their divine wisdom, figures like Ram and Krishna still faced incredible internal turmoil. It's just a striking reminder that absolutely no one is exempt from the mind's powerful influence. Now, this is where the source introduces this fascinating analogy from physics to explain what's happening inside us. It defines the mind as an electron. It's like a negatively charged particle, always in chaotic, unpredictable motion. This is the source of that constant, frenetic stream of thoughts. But there's another force at play, and this is what the source calls the proton. This is you. It's your conscious awareness, that positive, stable center that has the power to just observe the mind's chaos without getting swept away by it. So here you have it, the 2 fundamental forces inside you. On one side, you've got the electron, the chaotic mind, pulling you into the past and future. And on the other, you've got the proton, your stable consciousness, the part of you that can just watch. The entire battle for mental discipline happens right here, in the space between those 2. So if fighting it is basically a losing battle, what's the alternative? Well, this brings us to the core solution from our source, the art of setting. This right here is the central idea. The source argues that trying to fight your thoughts is a losing battle because, well, the mind is just too powerful. The secret isn't suppression, it's negotiation. You have to make a deal with it, what the source calls a setting. So the wrong way, the way we usually try to do it, is to force it into submission. But the setting way is a whole new strategy. First, you observe the thought without judgment. Then you give the mind a new command, and you cleverly redirect its powerful energy somewhere more productive. So let's get practical. How does this setting strategy actually work in the real world? The source offers a really fascinating and totally neutral case study from politics. It looks at the technique used by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to handle that constant flood of both intense criticism and fervent praise. Okay, here's the breakdown. A public figure is constantly bombarded with energy, right? Both positive and negative. The technique is to observe all of it without an emotional reaction. So instead of fighting the critics or getting a big head from the praise, all that energy, all that attention is simply redirected and used as fuel to move towards one single goal. Okay, here's a technique you can literally try tonight. When your mind is racing and just won't let you sleep, the source suggests you can outsmart it. How? By giving it a command that it finds really difficult to execute. So first, you just recognize what's happening. Then you give your mind an order, something really complex it doesn't know the answer to, like, okay, mind, tell me every detail about the geography of Egypt. The source suggests that this difficult, kind of boring task distracts the mind's chaotic energy. It gets frustrated and essentially it gives up, letting you finally fall asleep. And all of this, all these techniques, they lead to the ultimate goal. This isn't just about managing thoughts. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with your mind so you can master your reality.
The promise of mastering this whole art of setting is huge. It's about taking that chaotic, negative energy of the mind, that electron, and transforming it into something powerful and constructive.
So the source brings that physics analogy full circle. You transform the destructive, negatively charged electron into a positron, a positive, constructive force. You literally go from a state where your mind is controlling you to one where you are calmly and cleverly directing its immense power. So the final takeaway is this: that powerful, mischievous force inside your head can be your absolute worst enemy or your greatest ally.